Hey, it's Romania Black, and everything's fine. We're on episode 12. We're at the halfway point, I do believe, or near the halfway point. I can't remember if Orb is 24 or 25 episodes. It doesn't matter. We're near the halfway point this week, and yeah, everything's great. Just fine and dandy. Yolanta went home. They met. They met Nowak, and then he cornered them at the end of the episode, and things might be down a very dark turn, and Bardeni and Oczy are in a lot of trouble. So, and I'm sure Oczy is terrified of Nowak and what he could do. Bardeni's got a lot of pride, and I'm a bit worried about that pride, and I'm like, we talked about it at the end of last week's episode, but I'm like, So, I have some comments that we're going to talk about to distract us from the possible horrors of this episode. So, Oxio Ravenclaw, 2052 says, to clarify on the circle mark, basically it's the full stop punctuation. Full stop. So the title reads Orb, full stop, and Earth, full stop, on the movements of the Earth. And the halftime break picture is basically Earth, which it does give us the subtitles of that with a clever design. I'm sure as an English teacher, you'd have more to say than me on how that makes an impact. So there you go. Well, I mean, I feel like the show speaks for itself, right? I'm off duty right now anyway, until we get to the discussion. But yeah, I mean, to be fair, I'm more of a rhetoric and composition person than a linguistics person. There are different facets of being an English teacher. Grammar and linguistics were always the parts I went, about. They're important, but the English language, it makes its own rules up half the time, and it borrows from other languages and claims it as its own. And then over time, people decide we're not going to do that anymore with the language. And then it just changes. And I'm like, it's a lot to keep up with. My favorite parts of school were like the talk about rhetoric and writing and authorship and things like that. That stuff I loved. But the grammar part, I was like, all right, we've got to do this. It's part of it, right? But thank you for noting that. Tasto3204 says, as much as the conversation with Yolanta was Bardeni's way of gauging how knowledgeable she really is, I think he enjoyed it as much as she did. And these comments are for episode 8, by the way. He is basically an exile from academia, and based on his flashback earlier, it doesn't seem like he got on too well with people there anyway. So whenever Yolanta asked him a question or answered his, Bardeni was probably thinking, oh, thank God, finally some good damn academic discussion. See, that's what I love about Bardeni, and we talked about it last week. I love that he was so open with having this conversation with Yolanta, and he valued and respected her intellect. However, Bardeni, murdering his best friend for academic plagiarism and not getting along with anyone and kind of being a prick. I don't see that going over too well with Nowak, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm totally wrong, and they'll just hit it off and it'll be sunshine and rainbows. Who knows? Deep Raj for episode 9 says, the tale of Orb reminds us that our place in the universe is never fixed. It is shaped by motion, by cycles, and by the invisible forces we often take for granted. Just as the earth spins and drifts through vast space, so do our lives, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in chaos, but always in movement. To see ourselves as both small and infinite within this cosmic rhythm is humbling, and perhaps that humility is the first step towards true wisdom. Well said. Well said. I love that. Yes. Just the series, everything that Deep Raj just said, I'm like, that's basically why I love this series. I just, that humility, right? Which Bardeni doesn't have a lot of humility. So it's, begs the question, would he be able to access true wisdom? He thinks that he can. Again, we need to see what's going to happen this episode. But I love that description. Their comment on episode 9 was so good. And speaking of which, Moomin for episode 9 says, yes, the candle. I can only fantasize as to what the Library of Alexandria was like. The loss of knowledge. Yes. I remember as a kid reading in history class about the Library of Alexandria burning up and all of those documents that were just lost. I mean, we freak out when the Wayback Machine doesn't work or the Internet Archive loses things. Can you imagine what it would be like to actually lose like entire cultures and languages? Just crazy. I often think about how all the ancient knowledge we as a species have lost to time. To have a time machine and go back and save the documents in the Library of Alexandria. Yeah, if I had, but then again, you're like, just the butterfly effect of saving those documents, what would that lead to? Anyway, I'm also watching Steins Gate on this channel right now, so that's where my mind goes with time travel. But heck, there are objects that we find from ancient world that we can only guess as to their use. The Roman dodecahedron, not the villain's tridecagon to be confused with. We don't know its name, and many have ideas about it. Some people knit with it. Reading and writing are what makes us unique among animals. Language itself is not unique. It's the transmission of abstract ideas that transport you to another time and place. And Yolenta is absolutely correct. Akshay can see the truth of what she says. Although sometimes you need a Rosetta Stone if you want to make a person's world very small, make them illiterate, and crush their curiosity. Yeah, there are so many people I know, and again, this transcends to now, where there's so many people I know that they are so small-minded because they don't have any curiosity and they just, they don't have any intellectual prowess. And it's like, what a waste of your brain, What a waste. But yeah, I do like the idea of reading and writing being unique. And I, in college, one of my favorite things was learning about our communication and how we do that across cultures and how it doesn't have to be pen and ink. We communicate through so many things, Morse code, beadwork, hieroglyphics. Like it doesn't have to be a letter necessarily on a piece of paper. So fascinating. Again, why I love this series. And then Luminous had said in the Discord concerning episode 10, I love episode 10. That final scene with the bishop is so good because it instantly makes you realize if you were one of those medieval guys in the crowd listening to that speech, you could very likely end up being not that different from Nowak. And I responded with saying that, yeah, the bishop is very manipulative indeed. And yes, the bishop is using tactics that if you don't know about rhetoric, if you're not learned, as they would say, it would be easier to fall prey to such things. It's why those in power don't want to share skills, like the reading and writing, aka critical thinking and intellectual curiosity nowadays, because it's easier to control masses when they're not educated and they don't know how to spot manipulation. I think that, honestly, the rhetoric classes I took in college were so instrumental because once you see these tactics, once you know how people manipulate others, like Aristotle and Socrates, reading about the art of persuasion and how people use manipulation and how effective it is, once you know, there's like no going back. Like once I did that, there was a marketing class that we talked about the philosophy and the art of persuasion and marketing. Once I learned that, I was like, oh, hell no. And I became a salesman's nightmare. I was like, oh, I'm good. I think I'll figure it out myself. But yeah, it's easy to spot and then you're not convinced anymore. And they don't want that because then you can think for yourself. In the words of Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, soon you get ideas and thinking. So one more thing before we start this episode, because I've talked for, nearly 10 minutes. Before we start, I do want to say that I went to the bookstore today. The nearest bookstore, like legit, not Amazon, the nearest like actual bookstore is about 45 minutes from where I live. And so I had to go to an event for work today that was in that city. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go to that bookstore because I'm never in this area. And they had a special of buy one, get one 50% off on manga for like today only. And I was like, yes. And guess what I saw on the shelves? There was only one copy and you best believe a girl snagged it up. I got its paperback, but because there was no hardback, it was the only one. I was like, I wonder if Orb is here on the shelf. I was like, I want to see if they have Orb. And it is the both volumes 1 and 2 together. Look at that. I have not looked at it, obviously, because I don't want spoilers, but I will ask you all in the comments to let me know what episodes the first 2 volumes cover. And once I know what episodes they cover and if it is safe to read it, I will do so and get back to you on my thoughts. So I saw it today. It was the only copy that was on the shelf and it was the only thing for Orb. And I was like, I need it. So I'm super excited to have it. I'm very excited. It has Raffle in the front, of course, and on the back there is Oczy and Bardeni, which is exciting. But I've not read the back cover. I literally just put it in my bag, said we're good to go, and took it home because I was like, I want to ask everyone on the channel before I get into it, and there we go. So yeah. So anyway, I'm so excited. I'm also so very, very nervous. I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. It's probably gonna be fine. It's fine. It's just they've been taken into custody by Nowak. That's all. It's all right. So anyway, thank you all so much for the comments and the kind words. We're gonna get started with episode 12 of Orb on the Movements of the Earth, and we're gonna do that here in 3, 2, 1, and it's amazing how one tiny little necklace can have so much impact. Oh my God. Novak was pissed. I can't believe he actually said it. He was like, I'm pissed off right now. Yeah, for good reason. For many reasons. Okay, so here's the thing. I thought about this as soon as the episode was over because I love a halfway point of a series like this because you know it was going to get good, and it did, and we still have next week to have more resolution of things, so yay. Here's the thing. Do I think that Nowak is going to kill Akshay? No, because of that one screenshot in episode 1 that I keep going back to, and for a number of reasons. I think that Novak's alone, so even if he managed to detain Akshay, I don't think he's going to catch up with Bardeni. And I think that Bardeni might, I don't know, could Bardeni take Nowak in a fight? Bardeni's killed his friend that committed intellectual property plagiarism and theft. But I don't know. I think Bardeni's going to get away. I don't know that for sure. I think he's going to get away, but I think Akshay is going to fight Nowak. I think that Novak's going to knock Akshay out and put him in the carriage. And I think he's going to knock Akshay out and basically, make him incapacitated. And then he's going to go where Bardeni was, realize Bardeni left, and is going to be pissed because he's going to be like, he flew the coop, took the stuff with him, and then he's going to go back and he's going to torture Akshay for information, and that's where we get that screenshot from episode 1. Do I think Akshay is going to tell? Nope. I don't think Akshay is going to say a word. I think that our sweet, sweet Labrador man is going to take it to the grave. God, I love Akshay so much. He is so good in this episode. He's so good. He managed to move Bardeni, and that is unthinkable. So, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this episode. So they're confronted about all of this, and Bardeni's like, well, I guess it'd be a hard thing to tell your daughter. And here's the thing. I questioned a few episodes ago whether Bardeni's saying stuff about Novak's daughter was to kind of intimidate him and be like, it'd be a shame if your daughter knew what was going on, or be a shame if the church knew your daughter was involved with us. In hindsight, I don't think that Bardeni was, and you probably all have commented about this by now, and I probably won't get to those comments until after recording this, but I feel like Bardeni was just genuinely saying it like, wow, your daughter doesn't know a lot about you, and wow, you've kept her pretty far away from all this truth and all of what you do. I don't think he was intending to threaten Nowak about it, but I think that in hindsight, we all know that Bardeni is able to throw anybody under the bus, but I really genuinely think that Bardeni was just mentioning like, hey, Yolinta's your daughter, right? And she's been hanging out with us. Remember that? And that just makes Nowak even more pissed because he's like, my daughter could get in trouble. It also conveniently works out because when they were in the carriage and I thought the one guy was the bishop's son for a hot second because the black hair and slight facial hair, I thought it was, but it's clearly not him. It's just another soldier. So when Nowak was telling the soldier that his family's involved, I was like, that's an interesting thing to reveal to these scrubs, because if they go back to the church and say, yeah, Novak's daughter's involved somehow, that could put her in danger, but it just happens to work out that they all died. So nobody knows that Yolinta's involved. Nobody knows Yolinta's involved except Yolinta at this point and the people that are all in this one location. Soon to be Bardeni flying the coop. So we'll see. But yeah, I guess that would be a hard thing to tell your daughter. And I don't think Bardeni was meaning for it to sound threatening, but it does kind of. And Nowak was in a peachy keen, little jovial mood until he saw that damn necklace. And then everything came unglued. Like it's so genius. It's so genius because the show did not show us Novak's face. The show didn't show us what he looked like in that moment seeing the necklace. We just saw the back of his head. You can only imagine the ghost that he saw, the realization that this is connected to that haunting presence that's followed him for 10 years and has probably consumed his nightmares. This kid that sent full body chills down his bearded self from a decade ago, and then seeing it here. Oh, it's genius. It's great. He's like, I just keep putting it off. It's like, sure. And he's like, we received a certain tip, a diary full of codes on their visit to town. The thing that's wild about that is that the diary is Piast's. And the person that they suspect that the diary belongs to Bardeni or Aksha when that is not the case. It's Piast's diary. And what's fascinating about it is I kept being like, a part of me wanted them to tell Nowak, be like, oh, isn't that Count Piast's diary? But you can't say that because then you give away like, well, how did you know it's Count Piast? And they're like, oh, we were working on him to disprove his theory. And then you instantly, throw yourself right in the culprit position. So they couldn't say it was Piast's diary, but it's really fascinating that it's literally his work, the guy that was in charge of the church there and the guy in charge of the university at least. And that's the suspect material. Now, the one bishop, staying anonymous because what a coward. He's like, they decoded it using frequency analysis. And it was a diary that dealt with the most advanced astronomy. It began to propose an abnormal model of the cosmos. The sender didn't identify themselves. And when that happens, I have to gather the breadcrumbs myself. Now, to be fair, do we know if the sender identified themselves, or is Nowak lying, or is he telling the truth? He spins his words, so it's hard to tell. But he's like, I don't suspect you. I just need to look at your research. Lead the way. I am so glad that Bardeni is clever enough to cover his tracks. He was like, he planted all of these books that were completely safe to throw him off. I don't know how they read in that damn dark room. I don't know how they had enough moonlight to read. No wonder these people can't see anything because their eyes are shot for hell. Am I right? And then he saw the necklace. The moment I thought, I was like, okay. He's like, I'm sorry I took up your time. And he's like, yep. And the moment he put the book back, he saw the necklace. And we see his face for a brief moment. And then COP. I was like, we were doing so well. We were doing so well. And then just the necklace. It's like Raffles' ghost from Beyond the Grave was like, nah, you don't get out so easy. You don't get off so easily. But yeah, and then he leaves. He turns around, he's like, oh, well, seems like everything's perfectly fine. I feel rather silly. Bye. And the thing is, what I find interesting is Bardeni is not good at reading Novak's lies. And of course he's not, because Bardeni's never really been around Nowak. But we, the audience, immediately know when he's lying or when he's mad and he's just not showing it. He's putting on this front of being jovial. Like, we, the audience, have seen him enough to know how to kind of read his emotions. But Bardeni is not necessarily good at reading emotions, which is fascinating to me. So he doesn't notice anything's off. He's like, okay, good. Glad that worked out. And I think part of that is because Bardeni thinks he's better than everyone. So he's just kind of like, oh, good. Yeah, he's just a plebeian of the church. Why would he know any different? But Aksha knows what he does for a living and is like, no, we're in bad trouble. We are in bad trouble. That man, Nowak, immediately ran to go get everybody. And he's like, well, didn't I tell you that necklace belonged to the heretic? And Bardeni's like, ooh, we don't have a lot of time then. We need to get out of here. So the theme of fire connecting to knowledge has been a big central part of this series. And so we have, we've had Raffle burning things. We've had Bardeni and them burning things. Lots of things have been burnt over the course of this series. And it tying to that torch. And literally the passing of the torch. But the thing about it is, that's interesting that I wanted to bring up, is that Bardeni does not want to pass the torch. Bardeni's like, no. He's like, I'm not passing the torch. He's like, the buck stops here. He's like, nope, the buck stops here. I'm taking credit for the heliocentric theory. He's like, I'm doing that. And the fire is literally just a distraction. And to cover tracks. So similar to Raffle in the sense of trying to cover the tracks. The only thing is, Raffle left a letter, and Bardeni has not had the chance to write the letter. So the big thing is that the letter is something that's going to come later. And I don't know, at this point, the moment he didn't write the letter last week, I was like, they're going to get caught before he can write the letter. And I honestly, what I thought was going to happen did not end up happening. I did not imagine Aksha staying behind until he finally said it. I was like, oh my God, he's going to sacrifice himself. I thought they were going to both try to escape, and then they were going to get caught, or Aksha was going to get to the other side of the tunnel and somebody was going to be waiting on him. Maybe Bardeni's going to get away. I don't know. But he's like, steal a horse and head to your destination. And he's like, what are you going to do, Bardeni? And he's like, once the documents are fully burned. That in itself, can we just talk about that for a hot second? That little sentence in itself, the fact that Bardeni was like, go get a horse, go on ahead and go leave. He didn't make Aksha stay behind and help him burn the documents, which would have made it happen faster. He didn't make him stay behind and help him pack up, which he could have because he's been treating Aksha kind of like his little manservant this whole time. He didn't do that. He told him to get out. He's like, I'll take care of it. I'll be fine. And there's a part of that is literally Bardeni's ego thinking that he has everything under control and he'll be perfectly fine. But there's another part of it that's like, you actually genuinely cared about Aksha. You wanted to make sure he got out. And that little, his little, Bardeni's little cat-shaped Grinch heart grew 3 sizes this day. And I'm so proud of him. I'm like, look at him. He actually was like, once the documents are fully burned, I'll grab the ones I need. I'll write a letter and then I'll leave. I'm like, how much time did you think you had, sir? Because writing a letter takes a little bit of time considering the contents. Burning all them books takes a little bit of time. He was expecting to stay there a couple more hours. I would have gotten the hell out of Dodge and wrote that letter somewhere else. I've been like, I'm going to take my stuff and go. But yeah. And he's like, and that means we won't see each other for a while. I don't think they're going to see... There's a part of me that thinks they'll never see each other again. There's a part of me that thinks they'll never see each other again. I'm not ready for that, but I don't think we have a choice. I think we're being forced to watch them part ways. And he's like, indeed. I feel like Bardeni is a little bit sad. He's like, let's meet again as the world turns. We don't get to see his face. We see it looking into the fire, but the moment he's like, let's meet again as the world turns, we don't get to see his face. I think Bardeni genuinely was going to miss Aksha. Because I know Bardeni, he teases him, and Bardeni clearly thinks he's better than Aksha, but I think he genuinely, they formed a bond. And Bardeni, is not used to being around people that accepted him for who he was, accepted his intellect, didn't question it, and also was willing to help him, without asking for anything in return. And that's kind of what Aksha's been throughout this whole story. So I feel like Bardeni was like, damn, I'm actually going to miss you. So, but he's too proud to say that. He's like, we'll just meet again, And Aksha, who has just a little fanny pack on his back, ain't got nothing to his name. And then he thinks back on everything with that damn eyeball. And he's like, are you going to burn everything? And he says, yes. He's like, I'll take what I need most, but it's dangerous to leave the rest. Even if it were safe, I wouldn't leave anything. As I said before, the work must be mine alone. There was a part of me that wondered if he would give Aksha one of the books to take with him if he was sending him away first. Because the moment he said he was staying behind and was going to take care of everything himself, I got such a bad feeling. I was like, no, he's going to misjudge time. He's not going to know how serious Nowak is about this. He's not going to know how much this has affected him and how he's going to spring right back there to catch them. I was like, I again, wasn't thinking of Aksha sacrificing himself. I was like, oh, he's going to get caught. And so I thought in this moment, he was going to send Aksha with one of the books, as safeguarding, but then why would Bardeni do that? Because then he wouldn't get credit, right? So he's like, the worst work must be mine alone. I won't hand over my materials to anyone. I do wonder if the conversation between him and Akshay will affect him in the future. Because I do think that Bardeni is going to get away. That's my theory. Now, I could be jinxing everything, but it's already happened, so it can't be jinxed. But he said he wants the work for himself alone as his. I think that it would be really interesting, and I doubt Bardeni would do this because he's too proud and he's too arrogant, and I doubt he would do this, but it would be interesting if Yolanta went to find him later on and she somehow inherited the work down the road. Because she knew about their plan. She knows about the plan because she was there when they were talking about it. So she's heard all the details. So, I mean, Yolanta's smart. She could figure out, like, where he was going and what he was doing. So she could go find him in the Southwest or whatever he goes to. So I wonder if she will meet up with him to get the work and if he'll share it with her, or if she writes a treatise and he helps her get it published but lets her use her own name. Imagining her using publishing a treatise in her name that talks about heliocentrism. I mean, Nowak would turn the color of whiteboard coon. He would be as white as a sheet. But we'll see what that happens with that. But Aksha's like, is it right for you to hoard it all to yourself? And he's like, what? Look. In the channel over on Discord, people have been sharing that there's been a lot of Hubert and Ringo Starr, doujinshi, and fan art. And I'm like, of all the BL ships, that one makes sense, but would not have guessed it. Now listen, do I ship Aksha and Bardeni? They work together rather well as a ship. Yes. Do I ship them like as a romantic, they're all about each other? No, I feel like their ship is more like two soulmate bros that are just like, they're foils for each other. They complete each other's sandwiches. I feel like they are such good complements to each other and they balance each other out. And in this episode, my shipping, just my radar went through the roof. Like Bardeni noticing something's up with Aksha, meaning he's been observant, meaning he's been watching Aksha, so don't think we don't notice. And then just this conversation, I feel like Bardeni was like, where have you been all this time? Because this is, in a way, Bardeni hates this conversation. But in a way, it's like someone to challenge, like the Moriarty to his Sherlock, right? Although I do think that Aksha is more Sherlock and Bardeni's more Moriarty, but still, like they foil each other. And this conversation is amazing. Amazing. I love we spend so much time on it. He's like, I would never question you, but yeah, I am right now. He's like, actually, I do have something to say. He's like, if you keep isolating yourself, won't it be harder to notice mistakes? Aksha talks about an echo chamber. Right here, right now in this episode, Aksha comes out and says, in the past, all these guys like Piast and the guy before him, if you isolate yourself, you won't notice mistakes. And this applies on so many levels, y'all. So many levels. I mean, at the very basic level, I'm an English teacher, right? And so when we peer review papers, I tell students, whether they do this or not is dependent upon a lot of factors. But I tell students, I'm like, your brain wants to believe it's correct. Our brains want to believe we're right because we're humans. That's just how we function. So when you are writing things, sometimes you will make errors and your brain won't detect it because your brain's like, everything's great, golden, no problems here. But when you have a second person lay eyes on it, or a tutor lay eyes on it, or another teacher lay eyes on it, suddenly they're like, hey, you misspelled that word, or hey, you did this, or hey, you did that. And you're like, what? Because your brain just is programmed to think it's correct. And so if you isolate yourself and don't have other people look at your work or listen to criticism and take from it, you won't get better. It won't get better. If you isolate, you won't notice the mistakes and they will continue to always be there. And I struggle with this in certain aspects of my life as even a content creator, because there are certain triggers that I have from personal experience that really affect me. And I, over the last couple of years, have realized in reacting to some content that have those triggers, I was like, oh, girl, you get really heated about that and really up in arms about that because it really like triggers a part of your brain that's like fight or flight, and I'm ready to fight, right? So I've had to, people in the comment section for certain triggers, I will put my view out on there and then people will challenge that view. And depending on the tone and depending on the way in which it's challenged, it's very easy for me to want to say, well, that's not right. And that's not the way to go about it, right? You should be able to read it and look at that criticism and try to take something productive from it. But it's so easy when it's something that is traumatic to you to want to be in an echo chamber and only listen to the voices and the people that are saying, oh, I'm totally with you and I believe that and screw that person, rather than listening to what they have to say and trying to constructively take from it what you can. Now, granted, there are some comments that I've encountered that are just misogynist or just rude. People are just being a troll or an asshole. And I'm like, look at this person. That's awful. But, but then there are others that are offering some genuine critiques, but just, I want to isolate myself from that. And so what Aksha's saying here is very, it's easy for Bardeni to be like, no. He's like, wouldn't it be hard to know it's a mistake? And isn't that harmful to research? I don't know about you, but again, I'm from the US and we've been watching, different organizations kind of isolating themselves and not listening to any conducive research that's possibly, critiquing or offering harmful considerations or things to take note of. Instead, we want to just isolate into this little chamber where we're always right, but we can't do that with the rest of the world, so the rest of the world is going to leave us behind. And this just brings up some things that I worry about as an adult. So, but yeah, you're not going to get better, and it's harmful to research. I have a hard time with some political views that are binary, and it's like it has to be this way or this way, and I'm like, that's not how the world works. And the world is not limited to black and white. It's not a freaking Jedi. It's not just one way or the highway. There's so many factors that go into every facet of our lives, and I think that for some people that's really complicated and hard to imagine and hard for your brain to grasp. And so in an attempt to make things understandable, we want to simplify things and make it, well, it's either this or it's that. But the answer is usually it's not just this or that. And Aksha tries to tell Bardeni that, And he's like, I know it's not my place. I also like Bardeni having his hand in the sleeve. That's really cute. By the way, adorable. I also love that as a bishop, he has his own little hand warmer. Not that being in front of a fire wasn't helping that at all. He's like, I know it's not my place. I'm just rambling. And he's like, I'm listening. Just Bardeni being like, I'm listening to you. Go on. This ship, y'all, built from sticks, cascading across the waters. Bardeni was animated really well in some of these scenes. I love it. He's like, Piast realized he was wrong. He just tried to discover this new model. But not only that, he, was comparing with other geocentric models. What separates us from Count Piast? You can challenge mathematical errors on paper, but without firm proof, no one can claim with certainty that heliocentrism is the truth. I mean, he said that Bardeni is like, well, I know, but when I get out of here, I'm going to, take it to the next step. And the next step is the philosophy and all of that. But Aksha's saying, he's like, Bardeni, you can't be the only one that has access to this knowledge. You can't do that. You're good at the mathematical calculations. You're good at all of that. But without the firm proof that you can't get, if it's just you, then it's going to hit a wall. And if you can't get over that wall, then what happens? He's like, it won't be proven. And he says, even so, he believed in the possibility that he was wrong and accepted the truth. And then Bardeni says, are you saying heliocentrism is wrong? And Aksha's like, no, all I'm trying to say is, isn't it important to acknowledge that you might be wrong? And that goes back to what Hubert was saying. Hubert's like, being wrong is not bad. Making mistakes is okay. We learn from those mistakes. Those mistakes lead us to finding greater answers sometimes and finding truths in more ways than one than we wouldn't have gotten before. And I love that this ties back to Bardeni being so sure of himself. And Bardeni's entire thing is like, I'm right and I know it. And I'm the smartest person in the room and I know it. And Aksha's saying like, well, yes, you can be the smartest person in the room, but the smartest person in the room can still be wrong. And that's okay. He's like, it's important to acknowledge that you're wrong, especially when it comes to stuff like scholarship and research. This man, this peasant that is self-learned, self-taught, like, oh my gosh, my dude. If you don't allow others to dispute your ideas, then the sanctity of faith, because what does he say there? If you don't allow others to dispute your ideas, it's more like faith. Yep. And Bardeni's like, what? He's like, the sanctity of faith goes beyond logic or reason. But shouldn't it be kept separate from research? Separation of church and state. So Aksha says, with faith, it goes beyond logic and reason. And I love that a lot of his conversations here are because he's been around Bardeni. He's been listening to Bardeni. He's been soaking it up like a sponge, like a dog-shaped sponge, and considering all the things that he's been telling him and Yolenta. And he's like, look, you've told me that faith is this thing that's beyond logic or reason. It has no explanation. It is a higher power that we can't comprehend. And you believe it, and I believe in it. We'll talk about that faith. But he's like, but research, you've said also, is not supposed to be like faith. Research is supposed to be evidence and concrete logic. And I love that Aksha's saying, he's like, you're making these kind of one and the same at this point. And shouldn't you be separating them? I love that. I love it. Shouldn't we keep it separate? That's why it's important to have other people who can offer criticism. He's like, what made you think that? I like that Bardeni says, what made you think that we need to accept other criticism? And Aksha's like, well, he's like, long ago, I learned that such a thing is hope. And he's like, huh? If that is Bardeni's catchphrase, that is Bardeni's catchphrase. Huh? What? He's like, my former work mentor and the heretic who gave me the necklace. After they encountered the stone chest, they both found hope in passing the torch on to others. And to my surprise, that was more important to them than going to heaven. So Aksha's like, the idea is that from getting this, from having research and faith separate but alongside one another, he's like, they were both given this hope. And that hope was in passing on that knowledge and faith to the next to get better. They had faith that it was just going to keep getting better as it got passed to the next generation, right? And that was that hope. And Aksha's like, I lived a long time without any hope, so that made me feel better. And so he's like, if you don't pass on the knowledge that you have to somebody else, there's no hope. It's just going to stop with you, and that's it. And if it's disproved, then what good is it? Passing the torch or trusting others might sound nice in theory, but you'll never know if the other person will carry on. They might reject your plans in the end. In that sense, entrusting things to others is scary, not hopeful. Maybe having others refute or correct your ideas is what passing the torch really means. Because I like that Bardeni's like, well, but what if they don't do what I want them to do? What if I pass on this information and nothing comes of it? It just ends there, and that's the end of everything I've worked for, and it goes nowhere. And Aksha's like, well, yes, that's true, but what if you pass it on and people challenge it and make it better? You just challenged Piast's ideas and made it better. That's essentially the same thing. So, otherwise you're no different than Piast, and it just ends with you, and nobody knows the truth. If you are as you say you are, is what Aksha is saying. If you are as you say you are and you want to locate the truth, then part of that knowledge is inherently understanding that you don't have all the answers and that someone else may be able to take what you have and make it better. And that, I mean, to someone as proud as Bardeni is crazy. Misunderstandings or unexpected events can occur. And then he's like, the believer is opposed by the heretic. But the twists brought on by those outside elements are, you know, when it comes to heliocentrism, it's too dangerous to tell others, of course. He's like, I don't agree. But then he's like, wait a minute. He's like, what you're saying is incredibly dangerous. He says, I'm only speaking about your stance towards research. And when it comes to faith, and he's like, it's the stance that's dangerous. Applying that stance to research, which would mean abandoning the absolute truth, which should always be our goal. That's interesting. So here we talk about the idea of, I want to talk about the two truths. Okay, so I want to talk about capital T and small t truths. Yes, where is it? The philosophy of the big T, the big truth and the little truth. I want to get the right one that's not a Reddit page. The philosophy forum. Well, why not? Why not get in the philosophy forum? But yes, where I probably can't find the actual article because it is tied to philosophy. We studied it in graduate school, but it was the idea of the big truth versus the little truth. So you have two types of truths, right? You have capital T truths and you have little t truths, right? The little t truths are, I mean, the big capital truths are evidential. I can't remember exactly how it was phrased. It made sense in my head at the time learning it, but it was like evidential, factual, and objective, right? The objective truths that you cannot argue. They are just the way that they are. Water is wet. The idea that the earth is round. Sorry, flat earthers, it's round. But there are stars in the sky, like things that are capital T truths that are known, and you can't really argue them because they just exist. There's not really a way to argue it. Then there are little t truths that are more individualized. They're more individualized. They are more open to criticism, but they can lead to vast rewards for the self. They're more like spiritual truths, things that we know of ourselves, things that we theorize, things that are not objective. They cannot be fully proven, but they are as we know it in our individual existence. And so, Bardeni's whole thing is, but we're trying to find the capital T truth. This is the way the earth moves. It is cemented, it is solid, it is unshakable in its foundation. That's our theory. What you are suggesting is that we continue to just go around and find these truths and critique them and challenge them and change them. And he says that it would mean that all these researchers, scholars would swim forever in the waters of imperfection. It's kind of what we're doing now. But there's benefits to that, right? There's benefits to that. I would think that I watched a really good video the other day because in my country, again, I'm going to be political for a hot second. So just bear with me. This will date this video so quickly. But there's a conversation about what causes autism. What causes autism? Lots of factors. But there is a organization, a political group that wants to say, here is the cause. The capital T truth of the cause is this. But in the video I watched, the person brought up all of these different variables that make it to where you can't just say there is capital T cause of this disorder. Because, one, they pointed out that they had noted a study where it was saying like there was a rise in the cases that had been reported. And they noted a bunch of factors that people weren't really considering because they're not really on your radar unless you really think about it. Like one, there are more it's more likely to develop in premature children that are born before a certain gestation period. And in the past, those children died. They didn't live. If you were premature before a certain date and time, your chances of survival were very limited. So thus, you would not have autism. Versus now, those children live. So the children that have a higher risk factor of having autism, not that there's anything wrong with autism, it's a neurodivergency, but the point is that you are more likely to have it because of these factors. Well, before, those factors weren't as prevalent because they were deadly, and most children wouldn't live. Well, now they do. Also, in factors were that the way that we report data, the way that we collect data, the way that we identify and do mental health screenings is different than it was decades before. So you cannot place a capital T truth on gathering this data when your other little t truths are constantly changing, and it will be imperfect because it is all permeated with technology, how we get the data, who is left out, who is surveyed. It will never be perfect. But Bardeni would hate modern research because I think he would be forever frustrated by it, being like, what do you mean there's no perfect way to do it? And it's like, no, there's variables that change daily depending upon the technology, the research, who does it, so many other factors. And so not only that, but I get really upset and offended on behalf of those that have autism when someone is suggesting that there's a cause of it in a sense of having the connotation that it's a bad thing. Like, it's a neurodivergency. If everyone had the same brain like functionality as those with autism, if it was a majority instead of a minority, it wouldn't be considered an issue. I'm tired. No more political talk. But anyway, but that's the idea, right? And it's kind of like with the English language, when we learned the English language in school, in grad school, we were, there's that phrase. You've probably heard this when you were younger, of practice makes perfect. The very first week in our graduate studies of learning how to teach English, our instructors were like, that phrase, They're like, practice makes perfect suggests that the English language is always in its perfected state. It's not. They were like, practice makes progress is the motto that we have. And it's the motto I still use in my classes, because you will never perfect the art of writing. You will never perfect it. Technology will change. The modalities will change. The English language will change. Words will get added. Words will be dropped out of the language nobody uses. Nobody says thou shalt anymore in common conversation. They just don't. So it's like language changes. Writing changes. We're not using typewriters anymore. So you can't, shorthand. Shorthand was taught for a brief period of time in the US. My mother had to learn it when she was in high school. Do we use shorthand anymore? No. Do you even know what shorthand is? Probably not. But unless you're over the age of 40, you probably have no clue what that is. So it's like, it is, humanity forever swims in the waters of imperfection. But as Hubert says, that's not always a bad thing. You can gain so much knowledge from swimming in those waters and learning what you don't know. And it leads to more questions. If you're seeking this capital T truth, you want to seek to a point where there are no more questions. And if there are no more questions, then there is no more growth. And it kind of ties to the church in a sense, because this document, the Bible itself, if you view it as a literal document in the way that many people in the Christian faith do, it's not changed in 2,000 years and it's stagnant. And there's no, there are different ways the priests interpret the Bible, don't get me wrong, but the Bible itself hasn't changed, except if you're looking at translations. So there's that. But there is no growth or movement from that. And I think Aksh is trying to say, but if you get to this point of just seeking out, the objective truth and treating it like faith, he's like, you're eventually going to stop moving. Aksh is like, you won't keep moving if you do that. And isn't the point to prove that we're still moving? Research moves, it keeps going. Isn't that the point? I love this conversation between them. I think it's so fascinating. You're asking us to accept tragedy with open arms. And he's like, isn't that better than forever believing in a mistake? And I thought this was so interesting because, again, Bardeni is such a unique character. He's very faithful. He's very faithful. He believes in God. He believes in his church. He believes in his faith, but he also wants to know, like, what is the true objective world? Bardeni is fascinating because he believes that he's been chosen to find out the secrets that God has kept from most of mankind, and that he's capable of doing so, and that the world spinning is part of God's great knowledge that has been bestowed upon him. But Aksha's like, or we keep learning from our mistakes and making new mistakes and learning from them and keep evolving. Isn't that, I mean, it's evolution versus just creationism in a way, right? And it's interesting to see Bardeni like say, you know, we'll debate that thought at a later date. It's interesting to see Bardeni come across that. I don't think they're going to debate at a later date. Unless he gets tortured and Bardeni finds him years later. I don't know. So he's like, it's pointless to stay here. He turns his back on Aksha. He's like, I don't want to have this conversation. Until we meet again. And Aksha is about to leave when he sees that they're coming. He's like, we got like 5 minutes. Now, let me say, the only part about this episode that I was like, we got like 5 minutes till they show up. I felt like I was back in Dragon Ball Z on Namek again. Because I was like, that was the longest 5 minutes of my life. This part started at like 14:56. I guess, you know what? It was less than 5 minutes. Damn it, it was less than 5 minutes. Well, the show just showed me. But it felt like the longest 5 minutes in existence. I felt like I was back on Namek. I was like, get off the planet. Let's go, guys. Because they're coming. I just kept thinking they're going to get caught. They're going to get caught. This scene, though, where Aksha sacrifices himself, he's like, well, aren't you going to write the letter? He's like, I don't have time for this. I don't have any time to talk to you. He's like, I'll write the letter later. I need like 10 minutes to get all my stuff together. Meanwhile, Nowak is like, I'm pissed. I'm not happy. Not only am I having raffle flashbacks, but my daughter's involved in these guys. Like, nope. Because I thought about that at the beginning. I thought that, when Nowak came and looked through the house and he was just like, everything seems to be in order. There was a part of me that thought, he's not looking through all this stuff with the diligence that he normally does. And I think that the reason for that was because he didn't want his daughter implicated. And so he's like, let me just have faith in my daughter that she's telling the truth, that she's all good with everything. Let me just look through this stuff. Yep, it almost felt like he was in denial and was trying to tell himself, yeah, they're fine. My daughter's not in any danger. Like, we're all good. And I'll just tell him the tip is no big deal, whatever. Then when he saw the necklace and had the raffle flashback, he was like, He's like, my daughter, this is the heliocentrism. My daughter could get involved in this. Nope. And this ghost from 10 years in the past has come back to haunt me. Nope. And so then it was just, all bets were off, right? And so he's like, we have 5 minutes. He's like, get out of here. He's like, I need 10 minutes to get, honestly. And Aksha's like, I'll buy you the 10 minutes when he gets the sword. And he's like, do you intend to die? And he's like, I don't know. But I know I can buy time. Aksha White, he looked amazing. He looked like a knight in shining armor for Bardeni. Our sweet, sweet damsel in distress, Bardeni. Oh my God, y'all. He's like, at this rate, they'll capture us both, I was exactly worried about that. I'm like, they're going to capture them both. He's like, one of us should be able to get away. He's like, and you've got all the research. You've got all the things. I've given you a heart-to-heart that's going to make you question your entire philosophy. So you need to go now. And Bardeni's like, I don't think you understand. He's like, you're condemning yourself to hell. Again, Bardeni is a man of faith. He's like, you're condemning yourself to hell by doing this. Why would you condemn your soul for the sake of research? And Aksha's like, look, you asked why I decided to write the book. He's like, when I learned about heliocentrism, it inspired me. And that inspiration has grown day by day. This was like a confession. This was a confession, right? He's like, there was a time not long ago when I was desperate to leave for heaven. Basically, what Bardeni has taught him and what Aksha learned through heliocentrism, which is not necessarily Bardeni's doing. Bardeni has helped aid in that exploration, but it was really the heretic that showed him this. But he's like, heliocentrism became my faith. It became something beyond logic and reasoning that I don't understand, but it gave me inspiration. I was thinking of ending my life, and now it gave me hope that there was something better in this world beyond just waiting to die. And it does kind of almost read like a confession, being like, I'm doing this for you because what you've helped do is keep that, that hope for me alive. He's like, if it will protect that inspiration, I'm ready for hell. And Bardeni's like, what? Bardeni is like, oh my God, because it's just like what Bardeni gets from his faith, Aksha is getting from his faith, right? And I honestly, Aksha was ready to die for heaven. We shouldn't be surprised he's ready to die for hell, right? Should not be surprised. And then Bardeni thinks back of it meaning something to learn. And he's like, you're making a mistake. And he's like, am I? He's like, yes, you are. It's people like you who have never studied theology and are ignorant of hell that tend to make bad choices. Bardeni is saying, because Bardeni believes in hell and he believes it's a very bad place. And he's like, you don't understand. You don't realize like how bad hell is. And you're making these bad choices. You're going to end up there. He's like, I don't want you to end up there, man. Don't do that. And he's like, well, even if that's true, I won't regret it. And he's like, have you forgotten the speech you gave me earlier? You said it was important to accept the criticism of others. He's like, I'm giving you criticism, right? And to involve yourself in such a way, like with scholarly theory, like heliocentrism, is a grave mistake. He's like, you are right. But even so, heliocentrism is my faith. He's like, I know it's ridiculous to involve myself with it. It doesn't make any sense why I should do this, but it's my faith, and that's why. Can you understand what I'm throwing down? And Bardeni's like, he gets it. I mean, he's stunned, but he gets it, and he's like, okay. And I love he grabs the ink, because they're Catholic, right? Am I right in saying they're Catholic and it's like Ash Wednesday? Is it like he puts the mark on his head? Is that correct? Like he's marking him with the mark of... I'm not Catholic, so I don't know. I know Ash Wednesday they do that. But the power of this scene where Bardeni is reciting the prayer and asking God to protect Aksha... Oh my God, it's so good. And them in the stars, and like puts over like that's freaking Renaissance level art. It's so good. I can't decide what's gonna be the thumbnail. It's gonna be whatever looks the best. Because then they show up, and then there's Aksha standing out in the middle of the darkness and the moonlight. But him putting the necklace on, I'm like, oh, that one's so good too. Aksha looks amazing there. He looks so good. Love it. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. Also, these plebeians bringing a crossbow, like they couldn't be bothered. They have swords on them. They could fight Aksha with swords, but 4 guys against 1 with crossbows, really? Really? But I feel like crossbows are not, unless you're a Lannister in Game of Thrones, they're not really great close range. But Novak's like, give yourself up. And he's like, well, I'm not going to surrender, but we could talk. And Novak's like, nope. Novak's like, the last time some kid tried to talk to me, it shook my entire core belief system. So we're not going to talk. We're going to have them fire the crossbows at you. And then Aksha's like, yeah, I also worked in the city to bring people to justice under like the church's doctrine. So yeah, I can kind of fight. And we forget that. We forget Aksha is able to do that. And Aksha's like, I don't care to kill you if it means buying time. And they bought so much time because now Bardeni can hopefully get away. Now, Novak makes a pretty big point here in saying it's not people that are, unafraid. It's like it's not whether you're fighting to live. It's like, are you afraid to die? Aksha was not afraid to die. He was like at that point where he's like, nah, we're good. We're going to go for it. But this guy, he wanted to live. And that's, then it caused him to like go into self-preservation. Because Novak kind of understands. He's like, it's your will. When I was a mercenary, it's like you have to be able to accept that you may die and then just be like, I don't care and go through with it. He's like, that's not what I meant. And so he says, a truly strong warrior is not one ready to kill, but who is prepared to die. And this guy's self-preservation kicked in, and he was like, nope, can't do it. I can't believe he tripped on the rock and impaled himself. I'm with Nowak, where he was like, seriously? Crazy talk. But yeah, I just Akshay with the sword looking like a knight. And he's like, you're not prepared to die, are you? And he's like, we're about to find out. When did Akshay get the biggest cojones in this entire series? When did everything about him get so big? He waltzed in with his massive sword and gigantic balls and said, let's go. And I'm not talking about the one just hanging around his neck. Akshay. So I think he might find time for Bardeni to escape. I think that now that the other guys are dead, do I think Nowak could take him in a fight? I think Nowak is going to knock Akshay out, go run over to the cabin to see if Bardeni is still there. Bardeni's going to have flown the coop. He's going to be pissed. And then he's going to drag Akshay back to town and be like, well, you killed 4 of my men, and now I'm going to torture you until you give me information about where Bardeni went. And he's not going to do it. I also wonder, okay. 2 things could happen. Bardeni could get, I wonder what the letter is going to be. The letter that Raffle left was to talk about the heliocentrism and everything. And he left the letter saying, here's my stuff. He didn't leave his name, but he said, give 10% to the Ringo Starr, which Bardeni was like, we're not doing that. But he left the idea about heliocentrism there in the letter and the instructions to burn everything, right? I feel now that letter was found by Akshay and Gross, so Bardeni never really saw that letter, right? Maybe he did back in the episode. But either the letter, I think, is going to be 2 things. Either Bardeni is going to write a letter similar to Raffles, but I don't know exactly how that's going to pertain to him passing the torch. Or he could write a letter to Yolenta and be like, hey, girl, your dad's a mercenary and is probably killing my friend. So just thought you should know. Bye. I don't know. I'm so ready for next episode. I'm going to wait until I can read the comments for episodes 9 and 10. I'm going to wait till I can read those, but then we're going to dive into episode 13 because I can't wait. But anyway, God, this episode's so good. It's so good. It's kind of like, I talked about the whole autism thing with using that as an example, but it's sort of like when you talk about disorders or cancer. For example, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, there's a lot more cancer, diagnoses than there used to be. And granted, there's a lot more factors that cause it, but it's also the fact that we're acknowledging and we're finding out and researching those causes, right? And those get pointed out. And then we discover that, oh, well, there's all these factors. Or back when people died in the 1700s, they were like, oh, they just got sick and died. But maybe it was cancer. We just didn't know what it was. Back then, I mean, think of how many neurological variances that back in the past people were like, oh, that person's crazy. And it's like, oh, maybe they had schizophrenia. Maybe they had bipolar disorder. Maybe they were neurodivergent. We didn't have terms for those things. We didn't have ways to measure those things. So maybe because, as we evolve as a species, we gain more ways to identify different parts about us that we didn't know before. And for some people, it's hard to understand that. So anyway, I'm excited to hear your comment down below. I'm excited to hear what you thought about this episode. This episode was amazing. I'm so excited about it. But in any case, I'm not ready for next week, but I've talked for nearly an hour about this episode. Oh, it's so good. Oh, Akshay, my sweetheart. I'm going to go take screenshots of this episode because he's amazing and decide on the thumbnail. Decide which one I like the best, that works the best. So anyway, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah. I'm going to be back real soon, y'all, with episode 13 of Orb on the Movements of the Earth. Bye.